So if you guys follow me on Instagram, you know I'm a huge Paludarium nerd and fan. You know that I post a ton of pictures and videos from other people's Paludariums that I find that are super cool, that are inspirational to me, and I've been wanting to do my own for quite some time. Well, I haven't been able to do my own up until now, but it is in a tank that was previously scaped for Reefapalooza, which we have to go back in time about 2 months to show you what happened. So about 2 months ago, we started setting up this fish studio, and basically this is just to be backdrops for my videos and live streams and whatnot. And we really had to get these tanks also done for Reefapalooza, being that we were going there to Ven. We wanted to bring show tanks to really showcase the world of planted tanks in an all reefing convention. Keep in mind, we were one of 2 freshwater vendors there. So you have to imagine there was a whole giant convention center filled with reefing people that were keeping corals and saltwater fish and all these things, and I was one of 2 people that were selling freshwater stuff. So you kind of want to go and represent the best side of the freshwater hobby, especially to those saltwater people and people that may not necessarily keep freshwater or maybe kept both. You really wanted to show them what freshwater is all about, so that's what we did. So you may have heard of Kevin from Brooklyn Hardscapes. He's been in several videos with me. He's an aquascaper, and he's put together a couple of the tanks around me here, which he did to this tank originally, but I chose to redo it myself. And I'll go into why in just a little bit. So originally the idea for this tank behind me was to use red petrified wood that we had gotten in from a recent shipment of hardscapes, just because it was absolutely amazing looking. It has these beautiful red colors and veins of white, and it just looks absolutely stunning. What I really wanted to do for the scape was come up with something awesome, but unfortunately with 6 tanks we were really strapped for time, so I gave Kevin the reins on it and he came up with something absolutely amazing. So what he did is he lined up several of the stones in kind of a valley path, and then he used tiger wood to create these nice branching effects, and then we used just really simple plants, Anubias and moss, Christmas moss in particular, to really just showcase some plants on this, but it was primarily about the hardscape here and creating nice perspective down the center of the tank. And I thought the tank came out fantastic, and it was one of my favorites in the fish studio here, but when we transferred it to Reefapalooza, the tank didn't hold up. A lot of the stones wound up breaking apart in the wood, and things just didn't go well with this scape just because of the way we constructed it. And really, when you're trying to move these things, using this reef epoxy isn't really meant to hold all these bumps and whatnot that you go over throughout a car ride. So the scape didn't hold up during transport. So when we got to Reefapalooza, Kevin had to perform emergency CPR on the tank and just try and get it back to somewhat former glory, because it was actually in a lot of dismay. I unfortunately don't have any footage of that, but the thing was really messed up. So Kevin did his best to bring it back to its former glory for the convention. Then we brought it back here, and then it just wasn't the same. So being that I haven't done a Paludarium setup, I really wanted to take advantage of the big cube tank to try and really do a Paludarium setup for my own and really showcase it to you guys. But what I wanted to do is do some nice twists, which we'll get into in just a second. So first, I constructed a skeleton form out of light diffuser that you could pick up from Lowe's or Home Depot. If I can find it online on Amazon, I'll also link it below, but you're probably better off just going and picking it up from your local hardware store. The light diffuser is excellent for a couple different reasons. One, we've used it on the bottom of the tanks to help with rocks and dispersing the weight across the glass evenly. Because you have this rimless tank setup and you don't want rocks setting on a center point that could really damage the glass, you want to try and disperse the weight evenly, which the light diffuser helps to do. So in most of these tanks, we've used it at the bottom to really help do that. But what I chose to do for the scape is actually use it as a skeleton. So what I did is I measured it out to the size that I wanted and the height that I wanted, and I wanted to create a 3-tiered shelf. This is going to allow me to create some substantial height and really showcase the plants that I wanted to showcase. So I used knitting mesh to create a better surface for plants to mount onto, and I actually just siliconed it in place, as well as filling where I want to put aquarium soil for the plants. I use knitting mesh there so it just wouldn't seep out into the water as easily, and I figured it would be just a little bit better to plant plants in that. Of holes, so it's easier for me to plug plants into it or get moss or whatever I wanted to stick to it. So then I took the whole thing outside, I spray painted it using Flexi Dip, and that was just to get a black kind of structure, so that way it was going to be harder to see through all the plants. It being white would have shown really easily. So first we needed to remove everything out of the tank before we could set up our Paludarium. So we removed the rocks, the wood, the plants, and then we got to putting in the backbone or the skeleton of what we wanted to create. So I wanted to leave enough room on each side of the backbone to essentially allow other plants they wanted to plant further in the back to grow up and out of the sides of the tank, so we use that as space to put those plants in there. Next, we piled up rock around the base of the structure. Next, we filled the bottom planter up with contra soil that we have used in all the other scapes here. After we did that, I started piling up some more rock, and then I added the wood. So we used a lot of the wood fragments that were left over from the previous build, as well as some other ones that I had laying around, to just create almost a similar effect to what I had originally with all the branches coming down, except in the front of the tank, what I wanted to really capture is the wood coming down and over the rock. So now that brings me on to the plants that we wanted to use in this tank, and I wanted to showcase two things having to do with this tank. One, red mangroves. Red mangroves, if you're not familiar with them, they are trees that grow in saltwater along the shores of most coastal areas. They're found in almost every continent, I believe, maybe except for like Antarctica, but they help with soil erosion, and there's a big backstory behind them. Maybe we'll go into it in a future video, but basically they were almost over harvested to extinction in some cases, and it really kind of impacted the coastal communities on where it was harvested at, because it helps with soil erosion. And basically that's what I wanted to replicate in this tank, is allowing the mangroves to eventually grow up and out of the tank much bigger than what they are currently. But I wanted to replicate what their roots look like that would hold back soil from being eroded, as well as they stop giant waves like tsunamis and stuff like that from impacting coastal areas. So in this tank I put 4 red mangroves. Now they are just long stems with just 2 leaves at the very top right now, and they look awesome. I absolutely love these plants. I have a couple more. I may do something else with them in the future, but these are ones that I got and I just ordered them from Amazon. Go figure. Now red mangroves can grow in saltwater or freshwater or brackish water. It really doesn't matter. In freshwater they're going to grow much faster, actually, in most cases, assuming they have enough light. In saltwater they actually have the ability to absorb and excrete the salt from their leaves, in which case you would have to go through and spray and clean the leaves about every week, because the salt will build up and actually impact photosynthesis. In this case, it will only be absorbing the salt that is kind of dissolved in the water, which probably wouldn't be much. So I may go through every couple of weeks and just spray down the leaves just to remove any excess salt waste that may be accumulating on the leaves. So after the red mangroves were added, I started adding several different types of Anubias, everything from Anubias Nana Petite to Anubias Nana Barteri, and I believe some golden coin. I also added in Java Fern Trident, which I just had a large clump of that was left over from something and I really liked it, so I wanted to add that in. I also added in mini Christmas moss that was in this tank originally, and Monte Carlo along with some Buce just to give some color variation here or there. So then the next tier up from the bottom level where the red mangroves are planted is kind of a pond slash bog, and what that placement allowed me to do is use pond plants. So in this tank I particularly added a rain lily and aquatic mint along with sensitive fern, and also a rather large Anubis, which I think should be able to do fine up out of the water, but we'll see over time. Now from there in the back I also planted Pennywort. Now Pennywort's going to grow up out of the tank. It's an immersed plant, so it's going to just start spreading. We'll probably have some growing over the sides of the tank. So we also added water celery, or variegated water celery, to the pond layer as well. And now in the back I added several plants, and I'll try and name them all. I have a peace lily, Parlor Palm, 2 ferns that I'm not sure of the name. If I remember, I'll put them here. One actually came from Serpa Design. Strawberry Begonia. I have another Begonia I forgot the name of that I got from online. I'll also put that on the screen. Oxtail plant, which is a really cool house plant as well. And I got a Begonia from Serpa Design as well. I then added in this, it's a small little almost palm tree looking plant. I will list the name of that as well. A plant called Arrowhead, and then 2 types of Peperomia and a Ficus Pumila, which I got from Serpa Design as well. Oh, and last but not least, I also in the back of the tank I added in a Monstera Deliciousa, which is a house plant that I really love. So then from there I also added in some driftwood coming up those sides, but what I did is I attached some hydrolon wicking fabric, and what that does is it basically takes moisture from the tank and wicks it all the way up along the fabric to create a moist surface. So my idea for this was to put some of the Christmas moss that I had and allow it to kind of stay wet from the hydrolon. Now I will say it has dried out at the top, but I do believe the bottom of the moss is going to be damp enough for it to continue to grow. So as long as it stays on the wicking fabric, it should be able to be moist enough where the plant will grow. It's going to transition. It's going to look differently than it would if it was underwater. Also to the wood, I added in some air plants just because I really wanted to showcase some air plants as well. And I may add some other types of plants in the future once I see how the wicking fabric does with the moss. So overall, this is a very, very kind of experimental tank. We're going to see what plants grow, what plants don't. There may be a time at which a lot of these plants back here overtake each other, and we'll have to kind of thin them out as we go along. There are several fast-growing species in here, which I'm going to be excited to see what happens and what grows. Oh, I also forgot to mention we have this nerve plant too. If you could see that with the white and green veins there, really cool plant. Overall though, really cool plants. I really love this setup. This is one of my favorite in the studio back here. So I know the question is going to come up, what size tank is this? This is a 16 by 16 by 16 cube. It is a rimless setup. It's roughly about 16 gallons. So the light here is a Kessel A80. I have to give a big shout out to them for supplying the light. Now, they did not pay for the sponsorship in this video, but they did supply the light, so I thank them very much. I will let you guys know in a future video if I really like this light and how it grows plants. But for right now, it's still in its testing phases, so I can't give you a definite judgment on the light just yet. We are also using an Eheim 2217 filter here. Now, on the other aquariums, we've been using the Suns, and they've been working out great, but because this is a bigger tank, I wanted something just a little bit bigger so it can handle a bigger volume of water. Overall though, I hope you guys really like this tank. It took me a while to kind of picture it in my mind and really apply it here, but I think it came out exactly what I had in my mind. So let me know down in the comments below if you've ever done a paludarium setup or what you think of mine, or if this inspires you to maybe go about and make your own. Now, it is kind of a paludarium. A paludarium is typically like half filled with water. This is mostly filled with water, and that's because I wanted to incorporate the house plants and the pond plants up top as well, so I needed the water level a bit higher than normal. If you enjoyed this video though, make sure you hit that like button. If you're new here, you can click the circle button to subscribe to this channel. If you want to check out our last video where we showed the setting up of the desert aquarium, you can click up there. If you want to see my biggest tip to aquarium plants, you can click down there for that video. And if you want to support these videos, you can visit our website, h2oplants.com, and pick up a ton of the plants you saw here today, as well as many others. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.